This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Adam Caplan is here. Football at 4, the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. And their YouTube channel, just search Inside the Birds. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Well, last night was kind of ordinary, but not ordinary. The Eagles didn't move, but they ended up with the player they would have moved for, potentially. They targeted a corner in round 1. They got a corner in round 1, but they got it at 22, Adam Caplan. They got Quinyon Mitchell, and we had heard a lot of buzz, hey, they might trade up, and he would be the guy at 12 or 16. But why 22 for Mr. Mitchell?
Mike, good to be with you. Yeah, so here's what happened. And Howie Roseman, their general manager, made the decision to draft Mitchell. Said it in passing last night what happened, but I'll give you better details. So, as one team told me last night, that once 5 quarterbacks went in the top 10, which nobody saw coming, there were some defensive players that were going to drop. And then the Raiders kind of stunned a lot of people. Though, as far as just being one of the best players overall, Brock Bowers is a really good pick. But they drafted Michael Mayer last year. Nobody saw them drafting Brock Bowers. I talked to a bunch of teams that were like, wow, we didn't see that. So he went at 13. By the way, why am I mentioning the Raiders in addition to them surprising us? Let me give you the list of teams that could have drafted a corner who had a pretty significant need. Denver had a need, opposite Patrick Surtain. They took Bo Nix. That was a stunner. Certainly, he had a much lower grade from other teams, but Denver loved him. Brock Bowers, the Raiders, they needed a corner. The Colts need a second outside corner. They don't have one, right? They took Latu. Minnesota, who traded up, they didn't take the corner. They took Dallas Turner, the edge rusher, who dropped. The Rams didn't take the corner. They needed one. They took Jared Verse. The Steelers, now I mocked Fatano several times at ProFootballNetwork.com to make it to them. They took him. But they needed a corner, the Steelers, Mike. So this is kind of what Howie talked about. Once they saw that the corners weren't being taken, and some player, then Chop Robinson was taken a little bit earlier, and some people thought he went right before the Eagles. They weren't going to trade up. Now, what I could tell you for a fact is that they actually got calls for that pick closer to the time they made it, but they didn't do it. But I also would tell you that the fact that they didn't trade up, Mike, tells you that they were kind of okay. If they wanted Mitchell, don't get me wrong, but they had other players. Terry Arnold was their second corner. That's what we meant. We said it's either going to be Mitchell or Arnold. What we didn't know is they would never trade up for Mitchell. We didn't know that going in. I mean, hey, we got that part wrong. No, did anyone get that right? That at 22 they would get Mitchell? Probably not. But the fact of the matter is, and they had other players, by the way, they were looking at 22, not just corners. But to Howie's credit, I never would have believed, and I would have loved to know what the odds were. I would think that if Eagles staying at 22 and getting Quinyon Mitchell had to be at least plus 300.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody thought that was going to be the case there. I mean, the trade up, yes. And then the fact that, why him? Why they liked him over Arnold? Because some people said, all right, you got to trade up for Mitchell or Arnold. They ended up staying at 22 and had the choice between both of them.
Right. So, Mike, with Greg Cosell, we wanted Greg to explain this because we had a very good feeling that Mitchell would be the pick, and obviously if he didn't, we would have gone another direction. But we actually didn't do anything with Terry Arnold. It's funny. I'm not saying we absolutely 100% knew, because you never really know, Mike, especially with Howie Roseman, what he's going to do. But we felt that one way or the other they would get him by trading up, obviously, but we didn't think they'd get him at 22. But because we felt they'd get him one way or the other, we asked Greg, hey, listen, could you break down comparatively? We did this on yesterday's pre-show. Could you compare and contrast J.C. Horn, Surtain, and the other top corners comparatively? And Greg, Jeff, and I kind of had the same look. He's not at that level. He's on the next tier. But guess what? That still means he's a good number one corner. He's not a super high traits player, but he's a really good player. He's very good. He's not elite. He's just not. Surtain is elite, but that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't be a 5 to 6-time Pro Bowler. It doesn't mean that you'll be an All-Pro 3 or 4 times. That's a different story. but he's really good, high character. I was kind of blown away, to be honest with you, that they were able to get him there. At 22, I just never saw that coming. Nobody did. And I love what Dan Jeremiah. He of course he changed his percentage to 70% that they would trade out. They trade up. I was with him. I would have said 90%. I would have been wrong. So
yeah, well, he said 70% up, 30% back, and 0% at 22.
Oh yeah, right. Hey, you know what? I would have taken 0 too, man. Because a couple guys razzed us on Twitter. We're only giving you half credit because you said they wouldn't trade. You said they'd have to trade up to get him. Guilty as charged. I mean, come on. What do you want me to do? There's no way. Everybody follows Howie. Knows how impulsive he could be. And he, by the way, did you hear him talk about it last night? I guess he kind of hinted at it. You know, it's not like him to stay or not trade up. 8 first-round trades, by the way, Howie has made since he's been general manager.
Yeah, and last night was not one of them, which might have been the surprise of the draft. So that's why they liked him. Thoughts on him from around league circles as you kind of pick up all the information in the intel now on what kind of player he might be. And I think it's going to be interesting because now you have him. What's the future for James Bradberry?
Yeah, got it. Well, okay, we'll nail both. This will be a good segment here on this. So giving this a lot of thought. Bradbury's making Mike here. This is the reason why he's on the roster. In addition, they didn't have anybody else until this pick. When you look at Bradbury's situation, we'll start with him first, then we'll work our way back to Mitchell and so forth. Bradbury's going to make just under $12 million fully guaranteed this season. You don't. I know Bradbury more or less got benched last season. He had his playing time cut, and he looks like he can't play much anymore. They just don't have the experience at corner. If they cut him. You've got Job. Okay, Josh Job kind of, after a quick start, kind of got benched. Eli Rick's great story last season. They don't see him as a starter. They see him as a potential number 3 corner, and that's probably something that he'll have a chance to do this season. And really, when you look at it, you got just the question marks now with Ringo is more of a 4th corner. Isaiah Rodgers that are excited about, who's got some upside as a returner, as a backup corner, but they don't really know, Mike, who the future would be at corner if they didn't draft Mitchell. And Bradbury is not that. And by the way, this is the last year of his deal anyway. So it's kind of one of these situations where you don't want to say their hand was forced in the first round. They didn't have to do this. They could have done it in the second round, where, by the way, they have 2 second-round picks. But with this situation that they have now, they get it solved. They get a guy in Quinyon Mitchell who's got good length, athletic, high character. One thing which kind of surprised me, I haven't talked about this in a long time, but I might as well bring it up since we're going there on Mitchell. You know, people talk about University of Toledo, and I get all that. But when you really look at it, Mike, Bill Polian, the Hall of Fame general manager, told me when I asked him, I said, where do you put the level of competition? Where's the level of comp in your, he calls them he has like a top 10 ways that you evaluate a player. He put it at like number 7, which kind of stunned me. He said, grade the player, not the jersey, the school, or the competition. He goes, just look at the traits and look at the tape. And Quinyon Mitchell was no question going to be a first-round pick, but he's not, as I said earlier, Mike, he's not a number 1 level. He's not a high blue player. There's a scouting term, blue, red, and then purple. It's the Giddings scouting system. The blue guys are the blue chip players. Quinyon Mitchell's a blue chip player, but he's not a high blue player like Surtain. So that's probably why, Mike, why he dropped down, other than this stuff we just outlined earlier about, boy, a bunch of players went up earlier than they probably should have. That helped that Mitchell drop down. But you notice, though, Mike, no one from behind the Eagles. This is another thing that surprised me. If you look at the teams behind them, the Lions, by the way, they didn't think they needed to do that. They got Terrion Arnold, who is the next corner that we knew would go off the board. They didn't trade up to get Quinyon Mitchell. How about that? That they didn't do that. They could have done it. They could have traded up and get higher than the Eagles. They didn't do that. The Bucs, by the way, they traded Carlton Davis, who was their top corner for years, dropped off last season. They traded him to Detroit. They didn't want him. They didn't trade up to get him. So we have to. And by the way, Baltimore, who got a corner, they were looking for one. They got Nate Wiggins, who the Eagles had some interest in, but he was further down on their board, as we understand it. So, Mike, think about it. The league kind of spoke. They like They don't like Mitchell. They don't love him probably as much as the Eagles do.
Yeah, well, in a draft where a lot of offense was going off the board, the Eagles prosper by getting a corner that they wanted in round number 1, but there will forever be questions, much like Rager and Jefferson. You took one when the other guy was there. Yeah. These two guys will kind of be tied. Mitchell and Arnold will be the questions as they move forward here because they had the pick. They went with Mitchell over Terrion Arnold. And by the way, I don't know if you thought, when Pittsburgh, was on the board or sitting there, if Philly was going to try to jump over them, because I guess Troy Futanu was on the board at that spot too. You're thinking, did they want the offensive lineman? They didn't make the move, which tells you, no, they targeted this guy and this particular player. So when they say, this is the guy we wanted all along, I think you have to believe him in this instance.
Yeah, well, here's why, Mike. If you look at the situation right now, let's look at I know the draft is about the future, but if you look at the immediate future, which also plays into it to a lesser degree, Tyler Steen, they want to be the right guard. I understand they probably will have some competition. It could be with their 2-2s. We know they don't have a 3, but if they trade down, Mike, to the 3rd, there's a way that they could draft a guard in the 3rd. There are some good guards in the 3rd round. So, they got this solved here. Yeah, they still have to bring in an interior offensive lineman one way or the other, whether it's a veteran before training camp or the draft. They'll look to do that. But the bottom line is they have a starter. They've solved this issue, for the future. They now have a young stud corner. It doesn't mean, by the way, Mike, that they won't draft one tonight. I know that's not a popular thought, but Max Melton from Rutgers, who they love, we're told, they really do like him, who's got tremendous versatility, high character, traits player. The two best off seasons of any defensive player for this draft were Quinyon Mitchell and Max Melton. So take it for what it is.
All right, Adam Caplan, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. Before the draft started, they made news with one of their own. They extended wide receiver A.J. Brown. So why draft night? What's it mean?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of how funny is it and crazy that 2 years ago, on draft night, they acquired him, and 2 years later, they extend his contract. It's pretty. I'm sure they didn't plan that. It just happened to get done. What our understanding was that Brown's side has been approaching them for a while to get extended. Why? After the season, Mike, in A.J. Brown's contract, he had no guaranteed money left, and with his injury history, I know. Look, he's been healthy here, no doubt, for the 2 years, and with the Titans, he was not. He didn't practice a lot. The Titans told me at the time of the trade. That's part of. They were concerned the condition of his knees, but he's been great here, and it solves this concern that AJ might have had for the future about getting more guaranteed money, knowing that by structure they simply can't walk away anymore. They could have walked away, Mike, after the season. In fact, this is a big. If he was my client, I'm like, we are getting something done. I'm not going in at 25 without a new deal. Well. Next year, before this extension, his base salary was $15.25 million, not guaranteed. His salary cap number was an unhealthy $26.6 million. That's why we felt one way or the other, either he's not going to be or he's going to get a new deal. Now, it could be, we haven't got the breakdown. It could be an extension. There are things called an extension / renegotiation or restructure. We'll explain that more Tuesday. If we have that, once we get the terms, Mike, I'll break it down for you on Football at 4, but sometimes teams do that because they knew the time was coming. By the way, this is crazy. It's another reason why he won a new deal. And I know that his deal was kind of fluffed up. It was his old deal that was reported as $25 million a year was closer to $20 million a year. 2026 was the final year of this previous deal. The base salary was $30.25 million. The salary cap number is $41 million. Obviously, he would never see that.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know, I'll ask you, Smith got the deal first, and everybody said, wow, they got out ahead, and all these others, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown got one. You still got Chase and Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. The timing here that they get Brown ahead of all those other guys, so he doesn't have to say, well, look at what Jamar Chase got.
Sure. Look, yes, and I would say based on, with Hassan Reddick, and obviously that didn't work out well, they're good at getting ahead of stuff. That's a fair point, Mike. There's no way to know the percentage of what you brought up. That obviously plays into it. But the big thing is it's not like they decided to talk to him 2 days ago. But what happens is, though, on your point, they have the framework. They know where the numbers have to go, and that's why they though we had heard that he wanted this done earlier this offseason, from the Eagles standpoint, and really for AJ, you got to see where the numbers are, because you knew he had to make. Even in January, I could have told you he had to beat a Tyreek Hill's deal, which is $30 million a year. And I'm really interested to see how the guaranteed money looks, the real guarantees, which are rarely ever reported accurately. But I'm very curious to see what the breakdown is.
All right. We got the draft tonight on 97.3 ESPN. You can listen to the coverage starting at 7 o'clock. Day 2, we got 50 and 53, rounds 2 and 3. The Eagles do not own a third-round pick. So they got 2 picks in the second. Do they move up in the second? Do they move to try to get into the third? They own 2 second-round picks, no third. What are we thinking here? Who are some guys, names, and thoughts on how tonight might play out? You know, Howie likes to pull the trigger. He didn't get to do it last night, does he?
I know. I know, and he could be impulsive sometimes. And he talked about action. He was kind of laughing last night about no action. It's not like him. So, Mike, it's fair to bring that up. Now they're at 50. That's a little bit farther back in the second round. So you could never predict these things. And he did a great job. I want to go through the transcript. That he did a great job last night of explaining why you trade up. If you've got 4 or 5 players clustered and you're only 7 picks behind, there's pretty much very little reason to trade up. But if you're 5 picks away and there's only 1 player left in the cluster, and you want to go get him, if you want, and you know that, you probably want to get him because there's no one of value left past your pick. So that's the way it'll plan it. I'm going to give you an example. Brandon Coleman, who they had him in for a visit. He played left tackle in college, but what I've heard, he's more going to be a right tackle and guard at the next level. He's going to go in the second round. Most likely, he could drop early third, but most likely he's going to go somewhere, I believe, around where the Eagles pick at 50. He's a guy to keep an eye on. Cooper Beebe, if the Eagles trade down. I know some people have him in the second. I think he's more of a third-round pick. He's also a guard at right tackle. They really do need to get a guard right tackle guy to compete against Steen. Defensively, my favorite guy is Edgerrin Cooper, who they had in for a visit. He's the best off-the-ball linebacker that's left. He's phenomenal. He'd fit the scheme really well. We outlined Jalix Hunt. He's more of a third-round pick out of Houston Christian. He's an unbelievable story. A former safety who walked on at Cornell and transferred, and he had a late growth spurt. He was a high upside guy in the third round, but he's got a lot of development. We mentioned Max Melton as a second-round target. I don't think he'll get there, Mike, at 50. I'd be very surprised. I was told from anywhere from 30 to 33 to 45. I don't think he makes it. Who knows? Corley McKinstry, we weren't really on him in the pre-draft process for the Eagles. We mentioned with Cosell, but we knew that they weren't on him, so we just didn't mention him. I would be fascinated to see if he makes it there if they draft him, though. It would be great value. Andrew Phillips, they had him in. He's from Kentucky. He's a pretty talented guy who I know Greg Cosell really likes. And Marshawn Nealon from Western Michigan should go in the second round. He could be there, by the way, and they could use one more edge rusher. It's always about a rotation, Mike, at edge rush. And that Nealon's a kid that they had in for Western Michigan.
All right, Adam. Let's while we have you, get your thoughts on the draft in general. I mean, 14 offensive players off the board before a defensive player went. The quarterback situation, some of the trades that happened, the teams that took quarterbacks. Give us your overview on the rest of the first round last night.
Mike, I'll give you a Cliff Notes version. I was working for Sports Grid last night. I am tonight, which you could watch on any platform. And I said to those guys, this is ridiculous, the Bo Nix pick. But I said, let me see what NFL people think. So I texted a high-end offensive coach from AFC team who's involved in play calling. Said, hey, where did you guys have Nix? What are your thoughts? He goes, we thought he was very average. We had a mid to late second-round pick. We were kind of shocked by that one for Bo Nix going to Denver. But it only takes one team, Mike, and they love Bo Nix. Sean Payton, their head coach, who calls the place, talked about it. He had a great workout. They really like him. I was told he thinks he's got some Drew Brees in him, which seems ridiculous. But Drew Brees, by the way, was a second-round pick, very early second-round pick for the Chargers. This is and Latu going to 15, and they cleared him, the Colts. What I was told, Mike, is with him, it was never about would he be able to play. It was about how long could he play? Could he get to a second contract with the neck? So that certainly was one that was fascinating. a couple others here that I thought were, I don't want to say head scratchers, but I thought fascinating. How about the Buffalo Bills trading with the Chiefs, right? So what I'm told was the Chiefs' number one target was Worthy coming into this draft, where they were picking. They traded up with Buffalo. How about Buffalo, who lost both their starting receivers? Josh Allen needs a speed receiver, and they don't want Worthy. How do you explain that one? That was a head scratcher to me. And then Xavier Legette, that did surprise me that he went to the Panthers, and by the way, they traded up for him. He's kind of a raw prospect, but very gifted. Look, we got 10 linemen, not 8. My projection was 8. We got 10. I didn't think Graham Barton would make it in the first round, based on the coaches I spoke with, but I got actually 9 right, by the way, in my last mock for PFN. Man, it is hard to get double digits. It's next to impossible because I don't do trades. But the other one was a little bit, I don't want to call it a reach. Marius Sims, he's just a project out of Georgia who's going to be their new left tackle for the Bengals.
Well, there was a lot of chalk early. I mean, that was the funny part was people were actually hitting their mock drafts. It was like bang, 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 and then it got a little out of whack there. Atlanta goes Michael Penix, and I guess that kind of...
That was the one, Mike. Yeah. That was the one. I just want to... My bad, real quick. That was the one that blew me away. That one there, he's not going to play for 2 years at least. If Kirk, I'm so glad you brought that up. I can't believe I forgot that. That was the shocker. You don't take a guy at that position. First of all, what if Kirk Cousins played great year 3? Now, I know he'll be 39 then. It's beyond me, and Kirk Cousins, who apparently was not happy that they're going to take a guy who's not going to help the football team. That was a bizarre pick, Mike. And I'm sure they tried to trade down. No, they couldn't get rid of the pick, but that was a shocker.
Yep, and Giants too. By the way, at 6, they end up getting a wide receiver. They were disciplined to not go down that quarterback road. So kudos to them. Yeah,
Malik Neighbors is a stud.
Yeah,
he is a phenomenal football player. I know there's some maturity issues with him, as I understand it, but he's a great football player. And they finally have a legit starting NFL receiver. Man, they keep having these number 3s, 4s, and 5s. Ask the Eagles what that's like in that 2020. You know, you can't win. You got to have primetime players. Good job by the Giants there.
Good stuff here, Adam Caplan. Check out the Inside the Birds podcast for more reaction in their YouTube channel with reaction of the picks last night. You can check it out on all podcasting platforms and just on YouTube. Search Inside the Birds. Adam Caplan will be back to give us his thoughts on the entire draft on Tuesday's edition of Football at 4. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.